about 30 miles away from her home in Giddings. And according to the trial, and her fiance, Fennell, said she left around 3 a.m. to be at work at 3:30. She never made it to work, and an employee at HEB called her mother asking where she was. And that's because her mother lived downstairs from where Stacy and Jimmy lived. In the morning, Stacy's body was found on Bluebonnet Drive. She had been raped and strangled with a belt. Part of the belt was found at the scene, and the other part was found in Fennell's truck. The truck was found parked at the Bastrop High School. The medical examiner found that Stacy had been raped and she died from being strangled with her belt. During the investigation, Rodney Reed was brought in for questioning, but let go because he stated he didn't know Stites. About a year later, the DNA from sperm that the medical examiner found inside Stacy was found to match with Reed. He was questioned again, and this time he admitted he did know Stacy, and in fact they were dating, and he had last seen her 2 days before she was murdered. He was arrested, and a jury found him guilty of murder. It all seems pretty cut and dry, but slowly over the years, more and more information is coming out that is not so cut and dry. Expert testimony has been retracted, the time of death for Stacy has changed, and information comes out that the evidence was mishandled. Stacy is going to tell us more information about this and all the things that just don't make sense.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Yeah, the thing that stands out to me about this case is that so many things that happened during this investigation and during this case would not be allowed to happen today, okay? Now, with that said, one of the things that has happened here recently is after a execution date had been set for Rodney Reed, and he has been on death row, like you said, for 22 years. Well, they have finally set an execution date for November of this year, and just shortly after that, the 3 expert witnesses that testified in the original case has came forward, and they have recanted their testimony. Okay, they have said, they originally said, and this is what we feel like was a big part in him being found guilty, was that the his sperm that was found in Stacy's site, that it could not have been there, but for only last for 24 hours. Well, now that new testing has found that sperm can last for up to 5 days and still be intact for up to 5 days. So that's a biggie. That changes kind of the whole timeline on that with the sperm and the original testimony. But all 3 witnesses, expert witnesses, have come forward and said that the testimony that they gave was a huge error. Okay, the other thing that is compelling in a what in the world kind of moment is that never was the belt that was used as the murder weapon and found at both scenes, where the body was dropped and where the truck was found. Part of the belt was found at both of those places. That belt was not tested for DNA. Who does not test for DNA the murder weapon? This does not make sense.
Yeah, it's true.
No kidding.
The other thing that doesn't make sense was that the apartment where Stacy Stites lived with Jimmy Fennell, the fiance, the apartment was not searched. Who does not go in and search the apartment of a victim, to see was there threatening phone calls, was there this or that? I mean, these avenues have just not been taken. The other thing that is kind of baffling to us that we've kind of discussed is that at the site where Stacy Stites' body was found there on Bluebonnet, that just across the road, that was the places that we visited, and so there were 2 beer cans. These beer cans were tested, and there was DNA evidence that these beer cans were left there from the night that they found her body, and that it had 2 of the officers' DNA on the cans. And so that sometime within a 24-hour period that these officers were there where the bodies were found with drinking beer. These things just don't make sense to me. Why would the officers be there drinking beer? That's totally baffling. I don't get it. The other major thing that has come to light is that there were several items that were brought in by citizens after the initial crime scene or where the body was processed. There was 2 condoms, a knife handle, and part of a T-shirt found somewhere in that proximity, and a citizen found it and definitely thought that it was potentially had something to do with this crime scene, brought it into the police station, but yet it was deemed, it looked like the condoms were old and cracked, and they just didn't feel like that it applied to the case or because they were old. So none of these things were ever tested. Mm-hmm. Now, that does not make sense to me, Jerry and Sarah. Tell me if I'm crazy here, but okay, a knife handle, condoms, and this was a rape case, and part of a T-shirt. Now, Stacey Stites' body was found without a shirt, okay? Or, I mean, if you're just looking at it and you're trying to keep an open mind, okay, could this have been the T-shirt of the murderer? Did Stacey Stites' shirt, was it found? What shirt was she wearing? I would assume she was wearing her uniform from HEB, the local grocery store where she worked, but we really don't know.
Right, her uniform could have been, if they had lockers at work or if she had a bag or something, a uniform could have been somewhere else, but a underneath shirt probably would have been on her.
Come to think of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did Jimmy Fennell have a shirt like that? Did Rodney Reed have a shirt like that? These things that they have been tested.
Of course, we're all assuming that she was dressed for work, and we don't know if something could have potentially happened before her commute or something happened much prior to that.
Absolutely. The timeline has been changed. Originally, they thought that she had died at 3:30, and now there is new testing and such that her body, that she could have been murdered more closer to 12 o'clock. So that changes the timeline of everything.
Oh, it sure does.
That's why it does. I mean, because if it happened more close at 12 o'clock, then she could have been at home still with Jimmy Fennell.
Yeah, for sure, because he did say she didn't leave till 3. So if she had died at midnight, then, yeah, she would have assumably been home. So what's going on with that?
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have yet been on a drive to work.
No, she wouldn't have been on her commute as normal. I mean, she would have been at home where Jimmy Fennell could have definitely, and I say that and I'm making a point because we really won't ever know what if something happened in that apartment, because that's my next point, is that this apartment was never searched. And so some of that that would have been evidence potentially gone forever. And so that was a mistake made in this case. Then that brings me to my next huge point of what doesn't make sense is, why did Rodney Reed's lawyers not say, hey, we want her apartment searched, or we want more DNA testing, or, for example, okay, why is the murder weapon, why has there not been DNA testing done on that, and we want to order that to be done? It's kind of interesting is that at a later date, one of the expert witnesses, not the same ones from the original trial, but they have found that when looking at all of the information, they feel like that there was too much fluid in Stacey Stites' lungs. They cannot find anything that should account for this, that there was nothing brought to light that should account for this. That's the biggie.
That's a big one. I was just thinking when you brought that up about the fluid in the lungs, it makes you wonder, how did it get there? I mean, if she was still at home, was she in the bath and something happened to her? Was she around the sink? You could say, well, maybe she was drowned in Bastrop Lake and then taken over the field, but that would have been a lot of work and trouble, so I don't see that. But it makes you wonder, if she's got fluid in her lungs, what happened? Of course, that's not the cause of her death. The strangling was, but
do they really know
that's different. Yeah.
Do they really know that the fluid was water? Versus someone trying to stage that she had been drinking, like make her guzzle a couple of beers. Or, you know what I mean?
Well, that would be in your lungs, so drinking beer would be in your stomach.
Oh, true. So it was
and
lungs.
listen, but this expert witness, they're actually saying that he thinks that she was asphyxiated. So, yeah, they're changing that. Would change actually cause of death. And so that's why this is one of those moments. And Sarah, I did want to go back to your point not to bounce around, but you were going to make a comment possibly about the beer cans, and I kind of interrupted you, so I wanted to see what your thoughts were there.
Well, along the lines that one of those inconsistent time frames, it seems like not only not searching the apartment where Stacy and Jimmy lived, the fact that Jimmy had one of his former police officers, didn't he have a statement later that referenced, actually Jimmy had referenced going out drinking the night before. So when I think about that, I think, would you take your truck to go drinking? Who were you drinking with? Where were you drinking at? And in terms of like Stacy having an early morning shift, and then anybody drinking at all on that morning or afternoon, and those beer cans supposedly found within 24 hours, I could see beer cans having been drunk from the night before. And you wonder if someone's cleaning up the truck on the way of driving away from dumping the body. If they throw
that's brilliant.
If they throw cans out of the truck on the way to go park it, because the beer cans weren't going to be related to this processed crime scene, but a little clean up our own shit.
Well, you know what? You just touched on more than what you even. You know what? Something else that comes to mind. Okay, he was drinking beer the night before by his own admission, right?
But that's through a buddy saying his own, the buddy referencing Jimmy trying to be more like not wanting to draw attention that he'd been drinking the night before.
No, but Jimmy Fennell, that was his alibi for the evening before, was that he was earlier in the evening, right, that he was out drinking beer with his buddies, and then he come home and was watching some television. Isn't that?
I think
he had a baseball
yeah, I think you're right.
And drank, and so we know that they were in the process of drinking at some point the night before. And so, like you said, you could see where that might easily, let's get rid of these beer cans, and one of those were the officers that. This is where it gets crazy. Okay, that leads me into this. So they've been drinking. They've been drinking till who knows what time. Okay, then the next thing you know, they're over at the truck where it's been found, and they're working a crime scene, potentially their own crime scene.
Oh, jeez.
Well, you know, one more comment about the inconsistencies that you brought up, Stacy, was the whole commute, which I'm starting to kind of doubt that she ever departed for work, even though I know the mother referenced footsteps and hearing something. I think a mother would back her daughter before a future son-in-law in terms of how my mind would work. But
unless
I kind of go back to if she could have been killed at midnight, closer to midnight than the supposed departure for a trip or after leaving for a commute. That kind of ties in a little different with someone drinking the night before and where a crime may have taken place or why and whose motivation and who would have been angry. And that if you really did kill somebody at midnight, and you know they have to be at work at 3:30, and you know they have a certain time where you're gonna if someone were to try to mimic their patterns with opening a door and going down the steps, you think somebody kind of has that 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. That's all they have to work with for where are you going to hide a body? How are you going to
also, you said
if you're trying to or create a different scenario than what happened. You have that time frame, even though part of him being cleared was there was no way he could have done something at 3 a.m. and got back and been there for when the future mother-in-law called him to say Stacy didn't make it to work. So it sort of creates a new suspicion over what happened during those hours.
Absolutely.
And somebody,
and you mentioned this before, Sarah, and this is a quick point, but you said that only one set of footsteps went down the stairs. Well, you had said this previously. If you were carrying a body, then there would still only be one set of footprints.
And that would have been what the mother heard, and reminding everybody that the mother lived downstairs.
That would be pretty brazen if someone saw you carrying a body over your shoulders, no matter what condition that body was.
Well, but at 3 a.m., how many people
most people aren't going to be looking out the window or catching random sightings between the apartment stairs and wherever the truck was parked.
And I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, water in the lungs. If I recall correctly, the truck, I don't know if you were getting to this or not, Stacy, but
yes.
the truck in